Today's episode of Ham Radio 2.0 is brought to you by MFJ. MFJ sells antennas, analyzers, connectors, meters, amps, and accessories. Extensive research and development goes into the ham radio communication hobby business. New products are constantly on the horizon as MFJ realizes that to stay on top, it must continue to create and innovate. The main source for inspiration for new products comes from MFJ's growing customer base. MFJ receives many letters and phone calls from its clients requesting new equipment to be built. Other requests come in formally, in person, and in hamfests. For anything ham radio related, shop mfjenterprises.com.
Hello everybody, this is Adam, call sign AD0AM in Dyersville, Iowa, and you are watching the Ham Radio 2.0 video podcast series available on livefromthehamshack.tv and YouTube.
Ham Radio 2.0 episode 83. I am back in the shack, as you can see, with glee, I guess. Something like that. No, I'm back. I was out at the coast for 4 days last weekend, Friday through Monday. And you got to see the view of the ocean from the deck on my new beach house. Now, understand what I'm saying is a new beach house. It's not really my beach house. I do, quote-unquote, own it, but we are landlords and renting it out. I can't afford to buy a second home of my own, okay? So, long story short, what happened was we owned some rental property. My wife and I have had several duplexes for most of our marriage that we would rent out to tenants and own and be landlords and whatnot. So we kind of got tired of doing that 2 or 3 years ago and started selling off most of our duplexes. And for like the last 9 months of last year, something like that, we only had one left. We sold that one at the end of 2016, and that one is the last one we sold was the one we had the most equity in. So if you sell a duplex, at least in the state of Texas, I think this is a national law, but I'm not 100% certain on that. If you sell an investment property, a building or a house or whatever, if you sell an investment property and you make money on the equity and the fact that we've owned it for a long time, so we paid down the mortgage, then you have to pay capital gains tax on that profit, whatever. But what you can do is take that money and say, okay, instead of putting it in the bank, you can invest it in another property. So that's what we did. We invested in our beach house, put a bunch of money down, but we're having to rent it out to weekly and weekend tenants throughout the year to help pay for it because we can't, like I said, can't really afford a beach house of our own. So I said all that to say the fact that you'll see some more episodes from the beach house upcoming on Ham Radio 2.0 because I am making it a ham-friendly beach house. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to set up some antennas on the deck. We're going to do some HF work. I'm going to walk down to the ocean. We're going to throw an antenna with a tripod or something into the ocean, and we're going to use the ocean for a ground plane. So that's going to be fun. But I'm advertising. If you, I'll put a link to it down there. If anyone's interested in vacationing in Galveston, Texas, they're not the nicest beaches. You can certainly find nicer beaches, but you can also pay a lot more money to get to those places. So Galveston's a 5-hour trip for me. For anyone in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's about 5 hours from DFW down to Galveston. If you're in the Houston area, it's only about 45 minutes. The property management company that we're using down there says most of their tenants actually come from Houston. They come to vacation down there for a weekend or a week during the summer or something like that. So, but I am putting on the website page that advertises the house, I'm putting it ham radio friendly. I'm going to get some pictures of some antennas to put up there and kind of advertise it that way. So you'll probably see a couple of episodes upcoming on Ham Radio 2.0, probably this spring from the beach and the beach house with some HF work done. Maybe I can go down there and go do a contest one weekend or something. But anyway, that's what we were doing last weekend. Got back on Monday afternoon and posted my episode 82, which was the first forum that I recorded at the Orlando Hamcation, and it was titled The Future of Dayton. So the 3 or 4 guys who were kind of in charge of the Dayton Hamvention Committee came up and gave a talk about the new location, some of the new features that Hamvention will have, and some of the answering some questions about what's going to be new with Dayton since it's not going to be in the Hera Arena this year for the first time in who knows how many years. I think they say that in the forum. I just don't remember what the number was, but it was a good number. 15, 20 years, something like that has been in that location. So that was my first forum. This forum right here coming up that you're about to watch is put on by Jim Keeley, W1JJK, Whiskey 1 Juliet Juliet Kilo, and it is a comparison of digital voice modes in amateur radio. He goes through and he talks about DSTAR, he talks about Fusion, and he talks about DMR. Now, I've done quite a bit of DMR episodes on this series. I've done a couple of Fusion episodes on this series. I have posted forums that I've recorded about DSTAR on this series. I need to do some more DSTAR stuff. And I think most of you know, if you watch any of my shows, you know that I'm a bigger DMR fan than I am anything, and that still holds true. But I like to have a well-rounded opinion of, or a well-rounded information, wealth of information to give to you, the viewing audience. It's more interesting, I think, than me just giving my opinion about everything and saying, here's what I think about it, go away with that. You know, I like to get... Ham Radio 2.0 is about what's new in amateur radio, and what's new in amateur radio is not limited to my opinion. So, although my opinion is prevalent in this show because it's my freaking show, but I would like to get other people's opinions of stuff. I'm not going to always agree with other people, and people don't agree with me, and that's fine. And Jim says some stuff in this video that I'm like, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, or I'm not sure if I agree with that part of it, but you know, it was a very good forum topic. He did an excellent job in presenting it, and he didn't present it in such a manner that says, okay, this one's better than these other two, and here's why. He just said, here's the facts, here's how DSTAR works, here's how Fusion works, here's how DMR works, and he didn't really ever say which one he preferred. He said he preferred analog, really. There's one part he says, well, I still like analog better than any, but these are cool also. So that was good to hear, I guess. But he did a really good job of presenting. He was kind enough to let me record it and put it up on my video series. So here it is, the comparison of digital modes, DMR, DSTAR, and Fusion, as recorded in February of 2017 at the Orlando Hamcation, given by Jim Keeley, W1JJK. Thanks for watching, guys.
Let's see if how's the audio? Are you able to hear me louder, a little louder? Okay, that's good. Okay, I'll hold it up there a little better. I'm Jim Keeley. We're here talking about digital voice, the future of digital in amateur radio of W1JJK. Some people call me JJK. You can see how I got there. I'm not commercial, I'm not sponsored, I don't work for anybody, I'm not trying to sway you. There's 3 brands I'm going to talk about aside from analog. I'm not picking favorites, I'm not going to talk you into one or the other. I'm going to try to give you some background about how these things work, how the manufacturers are organized as to product development, as to what the future is going to be with them. So I'm not picking winners, I'm not sponsoring anybody. I got a lot of information from a lot of sources. I did a lot of reading of different, the gods of this equipment here that are a whole lot smarter than me and have written some of the handbooks and stuff on it, pulled stuff from their information so that I would understand it. And that was what I was targeting for, is that I wanted to get a picture of what this is and what the differences are. So that was me trying to put it together. The next thing, I presented it to one of the clubs that I belong to, and the next thing, I presented it here last year. But last year we were fully overflowed. So I don't know if anybody attended last year, but we were in a smaller room and we had easily 2 to 3 times the number of people that we had scheduled seats in it. So I'm doing it again this year, especially for folks who missed it. Digital radio is changing. If anybody just went over and was with Yuli's presentation, he's one of the leaders. They're developing products to manufacture in one of the lines, the digital radios. So they're on the cutting edge. They're experimenting, and they reminded me during that a lot of this is still experimentation. We're still part of the great experiment of going forth with a lot of this. I'll take questions at the end. I try to go through this and not get derailed, ADD and all that, so I try to take the questions at the end. If you look down on the bottom right, it may be too small to see, but there is a number on every slide. If you want me to go back to a slide, if you can spot that number in your question at the end, tell me the page number, we'll go back to it and we'll put it up on the screen if that helps. So just note the page question, the page number for the question. Topics we're going to talk about is digital cliff performance, digital voice methods, time slots, users linking the users, radio choices and prices. That varies a lot. Pros and cons, and using resources, and we'll do Q&A. This, to me, represents the common basic of the farther you get from an antenna, from the transmitter, the greater the distance, it falls off in a fairly linear fashion. That's a common sense thinking of the way analog has been for us. Your hiss and pop and static increase with your signal loss. But for comparison, in some cases you talk about people and they say, I got my digital radio and I can go all over town and I get better service from that than the old analog. Well, sometimes the old analog is on the top of a 30-story building and the digital might be in a different position. So I say, adjusting for equal power, height, and antenna, our comparisons would have to take that into account, that we're talking about equal things with that. One of the aspects of digital, and I'll start explaining digital in a second, is that there is something called a forward error correction. You know, some of you have worked with computers over the years, and you know about barcodes on your grocery items. All these things have an error checking part on it that helps the reader, the scanner, realize whether or not it got a good message or not, or a good barcode or a good number. So it's an error checking. This is part of the digital, and it's something where you might have a source, and then you go through an encoder process, and when you go across, you might have some of your bits drop out, but the decoder may be able to take that forward error correction and reconstruct the information that was dropped out in the process. This is something that goes back years with computers, and it's reconstructing of what dropped out. So there is, in the outgoing message, there is additional information, a redundancy added by the sending unit that lets this smart guy here figure out, I didn't get a complete message, and try to reassemble it. So that's something that is part of most of the digital processes. In analog, you have that same linear drop-off we just talked about a second ago. That's my analog FM signal. The lower the quality of the signal strength, you have a more linear drop-off of that. The digital is able to do things a little different. Because of the last slide with the forward error correction, you're often able to go farther out. And it's the same with the new digital TVs, where you used to get ghosts and echoes on your TV screen when you get out of range. Now you just get all that pop-up rectangular boxes on there of a broken signal when you're out of range, and you can't sort of hear through and in your brain reassemble the missing pieces. Well, the digital is doing the reassembly in here for you, but when you reach this point where you overwhelm that forward ever correction, the drop-off is much more steep than what you have here. But this section inside of, this white section inside of here is your advantage of the digital over the analog, that you'll be able to get more with it. Your minimum quality for audio comes up from the bottom here, and this varies according to your hearing, what jobs you did, your age. As you get older, you need a better quality up in here. So many of the people are very impressed when they first listen to anything digital. They're like, man, that is great stuff. I mean, it really sounds great. Probably can't beat the best analog signals, but it is impressive, and you do eliminate the hissing and the pops and the static that you get as you get farther out on this line here into the weak signal areas. FCC changed the rule January 1st, 2013. It didn't affect us in the room. It didn't affect the hams. It affected public service. It affected commercial. They, on that date, mandated that the users of those frequencies cut their bandwidth from 25 megahertz down to 12, and then added another thing in there and used some phrase about 6.25 equivalent. So half of the half. 25 was the original, 12 and a half is the new standard, but they had to show a digital equivalent. They had to show an equivalency of 6.25, half of the half. That's driven a number of things that affect our ham radios on digital. That's where some of the development is coming from, because the other environments had big pots of money to meet the new standards that the government required for their radios. And what this has to do with is the FCC was allowing 25 in here, and now they're saying do more with less bandwidth, double up the number of channels, so we can put other people in between on that and double up the number of people that are on the same bandwidth. So that was part of their thing, and then they looked into the future. Now this wasn't a surprise. I believe it was about 10 years before that date, the manufacturers, the big companies, had already started making their radios with that 12.5 equivalency. So if your city fire department had purchased new radios within about 10 years before that, they were probably ready for this change. But at that date, that mandated this had to shut down. So examples of voice compression. Got to remember what that was. Okay, what you're doing with digital is you're able to take like a second of speaking, and you can compress it down. Mathematically, you can compress it down to ones and zeros, and we'll use the example of about an 80% compression. So the computer or this camera could record me and speaking for 1 second, and then get it down to 0.2 seconds. You could crush it on down, and then when you want to play it back on the other end, you can expand it back up and fill the space. Since you've got this extra space in time here, you've got that extra 80%, when you're doing things with digital, you're able to take a packet of information. You're including that 1/5 second of voice, but you can include user IDs, other data that you might want to send, your GPS coordinates. You have to send synchronization on some of these things, so everybody is getting on the same heartbeat synchronized. Linking information, where do I want to go, my origin point, where am I now, my destination, where do I want my call to go. So all of that header or footer of information can be included, and your digital error correction, all of that can be squeezed into that extra space that the voice is not using. On this here, I put up information on two methods. Now, it's not just public safety and the commercial people that are interested in squeezing more on there. It's the phone carriers that are trying to take their existing amount of airwaves and get more users squeezed in on it. They do it also with using lots of antennas, cellular, little cells throughout the city with limited range, and they do it with other methods of TDMA and FDMA. This is FDMA, where the bandwidth is split and they sort of form two channels. This is a 12.5 spacing here, and you get two 6 1/4 channels back to back next to each other, and that's that frequency division. You're dividing the frequency. This is a more complex method here. This is time division. This is sort of like renting a condo, and you get your 1 week at Disney, and then somebody else gets their week. In this case here, we're splitting it between two users. So I might have someone over here, and he's talking to someone over here through a repeater, and these guys are able to take the first half of the time slot, the reds, and in their 1/5 of a second, they can get their words through. And then these guys are over here, and they're the blues in the slot 2, in the second half of that split second, and they're able to have their conversation too. And these guys aren't listening in on these guys. They're as well as on two separate channels. They just don't hear each other because they're time sharing the same moment of time. And that's showing here that these guys could be using the first half of that time slot 1, speaking there. And because of the computer of crushing it down, it crushes it down to less than the 1 second and then expands it back out to the full second. There's no apparent, there's no knowledge on the users of any sort of this broken interruption. The computers, the systems are able to handle this stuff, crush it down, pump it through the transmission process, and then on the other end, expand it back open. This, by the way, the example I was saying is the first half of a second that you might be occupying these guys. It's actually done 33 times a second. So they're taking that same process of a 6th or 33rd of a second, they crush it down, and they transmit that piece, let the other side have their 33rd of a second, crush it down, expand it. So that's that alternating time with the two voices on it. Because of that, a DMR, a TDMA, time division multiple access method, compared to a frequency division, this guy is always transmitting because he's split the frequency, but he's always transmitting on analog or on some of the older digital modes. But on the later phase, the DMR, which does the TD, time division, they have a longer battery life because they're only transmitting half of the time when the button's held. So you're holding the button for 10 seconds, but out of that 10 seconds, you only use 5 seconds of battery life. Okay, here's the quiz. How much of DSTAR radio technology does ICOM own? Very little of DSTAR's, a couple of answers I got. They own something. Anybody know what they own? They own the logo. That's what's owned by ICOM. They don't own the technology. This flying D with the D-Star, that is copyright, that's registered, that's what ICOM owns. That's it. So when you talk about the radios of, what digital companies will allow you to do that, just yesterday somebody handed me a brochure. I guess Kenwood now is doing D-Star, but for years nobody did D-Star. Flex did some, but ICOM doesn't lock out the other companies. It's just that it just hadn't had other companies going in. ICOM has had the market on that. But we'll talk about who has what. 3 ingredients of digital radio. Something important to realize is there are 3 ingredients to digital radio. The first ingredient that makes digital radio is the modulation. People call it the vocoder. And this is the thing where you can take the human voice in analog and convert it to the ones and zeros, convert it to the digital signal. That's the first piece of digital radio. The different manufacturers, and if you can't see that in the back, the first column generally will be DSTAR, second column will generally be Fusion, and the third column will be DMR. And for the vocoder, they have to go to a company, name slips me now what company that is, but there's a company that makes a chip, and that chip, in the case of DSTAR, is an Ambi Plus chip, copyright trademark thing, and it uses GMSK technology, one of the older cell phone technologies. Fusion uses 4FSK, which they call C4FM. They tweaked it a little bit more their way, but it's been out there, the 4FSK technology, and their chip is a different one. It's the Ambi Plus 2. So that's how Fusion does this step one of converting it to ones and zeros. The DMR folks use that same chip for that aspect of it, the Ambi 2 Plus, but it can also be a little bit of a different flavor for it. But that's the, and this chip, for any company that is going to make a radio and do this, they probably have to go to that same company and pay them for that. So that is a copyright area in that. The next step of the 3 ingredients is multiplex sharing. And these use FDMA at 6.25 width for their multiplex sharing. These guys send 2 of those 6.25s of the same technology, frequency division multiple access. And DMR uses the time division multiple access. They send it out at 12.5, but then they divide it by 2 for the first half of a second people and the second half of the second people. So they take it and divide it by 2, but as you can see, these guys all come out to be that 6.25 equivalency. Third step of doing digital radio is the protocol. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second, but this is basically that I said, you know, you have headers or data or addressing information of where you're originating, who you are, where you're going with your call. That's all squeezed into your little time slot with your 80% compression. So the protocol of what goes in and fills in the rest of that time slot in there, or that packet of information that goes out, this is the Japanese Amateur Radio League is who developed it, and they have it for open use for the past 13 years. The Fusion people have a proprietary system of doing it, and that's owned by Yaesu. And the DMR people, that's the ITSI, an international French, it's a French word, it's an acronym for it, but that is also open use under the DMR. So, what do you think that means for how radios get priced? Well, this one here has pretty well been owned by ICOM, so that's ICOM is the main game, the main player in that. There are other options. And this one, Yaesu is the owner. Nobody else is going to do it unless we come up with back doors. But this one here is open standard, and I'll show you later how that affects price on things. Because the equipment sources is ICOM Flex and Kenwood, Yaesu only, and this has, I don't know how many, dozens. I've got down Motorola, Hytera, Kenwood, Vertex Standard, and there's a bunch, and they're multiplying every day, and some of those might even have Bofang, Pofang names to it coming out. This is that third element of digital. This is the packet. I won't get into this, but this is where you have synchronization bits. This is the DSTAR, Fusion, and DMR methods, but this is how they send what's inside of a packet, their voice in some of the frames, their call signs, the routing, departure, origination, data frame, error correction. That part there, that's that protocol of what these companies developed. They figure out over the years the mathematics of what goes first and how to do some of that routing information. But this is how each of them does that. You can see data voice and their synchronization bits in on this one here, because under this method here, these people and these people better know the same clock ticks of a second so they don't step on each other. So that's all that synchronization on it. Linking repeaters, I call that the real reason to go digital. Some of the first people who went out and bought radios were quite impressed to talk around town on, I'm talking on digital. Doesn't it sound great? And to me, I was like, that sort of missed the point, because to me, the biggest reason to go digital is so that you can link across town, across cities, across the state, across the world. And that to me is really, because I'm not sold on that digital voice is better than good analog. I think analog voice, good analog is better. Digital is immensely interesting, and it does have that digital drop-off where you have that improved area. So I think there's a lot of advantages to it. But this, to me, this is the biggest advantage here, the real reason to go digital. Now, what is that? That's, to me, this is chat rooms. Back years ago, AOL did something that our kids did, which was they would get onto messages and they'd go into a chat room so that he'd go, and we'd go in there, we'd talk about the Yankees. We could all pick some subject, or, our religion, our state, our passions, our guitar playing, and you could find a spot on the internet where people would all go in and they could talk that common subject. That's a chat room or a conference call for the grown-ups. Some of us used to do a lot of conference call in our work, and you would have people from across the country. They all dial into one phone number, and we were all in one room. That's the same thing we're doing here. These folks call it reflectors. I'll meet you at Reflector 21B, and we'll talk about the Florida storm coming in. These folks call it Wires X, or rooms, and these folks call it talk groups. They're all the same. They're a point in virtual space that you all connect into, a conference call, and you're all talking to each other through that. Some of these stay connected by default to a certain talk group. Some are very easy to change from the talk group. Some are locked in. Depends on which system and who's operating your system. And I said on here before that, well, a lot of stuff might be generic that you can buy it. The gateways that operate these and connect these into the linking systems are proprietary, and someone then pointed out that in Europe and some parts of the US, they're not using the brand names for that. But in general, for the most part, if you want to get into reflectors, it's probably ICOM equipment or Yaesu equipment, or Motorola-based equipment or Hytera equipment. So in general, that's still a true statement, but there can be ways around it, and I think they're growing. Linkability. With selecting control in DSTAR, the user can pick out and say, I want to route this repeater that I'm on right now, I want to route it over to here, to South Texas, to go talk to my buds back home, and they can control that and make it happen. The Yaesu kind of controls the methodology here, and some of the repeater operators have had issues where they've found, rather than give control to the users, the masses, they like it locked in on North America or some other group, and so they will lock it in, and you as the user don't have the ability to route your repeater from your car and say, I want to go check the weather in Australia, which is possible under the other two groups if they're not locked. And this one, I've heard some are locking it, but yet that's not set up, that's not forced that way by Yaesu. It just depends on who your admin is of your repeater. And I know in Jacksonville, where I'm at, they just had that where they were allowing them to do that, and they found interference with it, so they locked it in, and that's, if you're on the main Jacksonville repeater, that's where you're going to be, is locked in on one group. User choice of chat rooms under the DSTAR system, which is an older system compared to the other two. You can pick any reflector, any user, any repeater. Generally, they're picking a chat room, a conference place, or a reflector to get in there. These are routed via Yaesu equipment, and the DMR actually has changed in the past weeks. In the past months, a lot of repeaters have gone over to a different Brandmeister. But in general, the old way was that worldwide there's well more than 100 different chat rooms to go into, and your bridge operator might make available 60 of those that he thought his users would want, and then a local repeater operator might make a subset of that. So your local operator would give you a choice of maybe 20 or something else. Now that's changing with Brandmeister for the users that I've seen. So what works best? Signal noise. There is none with the digital standards of having signal noise. With FM it varies. The vocoder, we've covered that. Voice naturalist. The naturalness of the voice, I think FM is the best on that. The winner among the digital, probably, I think certainly would be the Fusion, using both channels. They call that wide. And with wide, you occupy both channels with voice. And with this Fusion system, you can use one for data, one for voice, and still have good data. Their narrowband is very good, similar to the DMR. They're both competitive on that, but these guys have that option to occupy both parts of the system. And the DSTAR with the older chip is probably a little behind that, with having sometimes a lot of people reporting the robot voice from Star Wars R2-D2, where you get that drag sound in the syllables. So the newer chip, I think, is an advantage there, but some of the mapping is an advantage here. Holding good quality voice, robustness of things, the newer ones are a little better than the DSTAR ones. And then for recovering, where you've lost some bits of voice and stuff, oh, thank you, my virus is good. The DSTAR's ability to recover from losses is less than the newer chips on there, the +2 chips. Radio costs. My prices are probably inaccurate because I can't keep up with that. They keep changing prices, so you may find things are wrong on there. But looking at an HT or a mobile or a base type unit, these are some prices on here. And I'll tell you, on the Motorola products, prices are not published. And if you're going to be looking for, well, let me tell you what that is first, and I'll go through it. So where you're looking for a DSTAR, your source might be ICOM. Now Kenwood and Flex are also sources on there. But for a handheld on the basic end, last I saw for an ID 31A 285, for a higher end unit 420, 450 for a mobile 600, for a base unit like an ICOM 7100, a good price on it would be like $1,000. At some point I've found these prices matched somewhere on the internet, but the prices could be different. For Fusion, your source is going to be the Yaesu people, a lower end unit 300, 400, mobile 400 to 750, a base unit 1500, and then you get over to the DMR, and this is the Wild West because people are coming in with units every day. In fact, just seconds before I got started, I use a Titera 380, and I was going to say they run about $125 roughly or something else. Then somebody handed me this one, which is a Connect Systems, and they've also broken that same price point. I think they're about $130 is what Jason said to me. So those are, I mean, this is moving quickly, but these people here, the sources are many sources. You have so much competition going on there that as soon as everybody started buying a Titera at the entry point of $130, a lot of people wouldn't be interested in this if it wasn't a $130 radio. If they were having to commit $300, $400, $500, $800 for a handheld radio, they might not be as interested, but in that kind of money, it interests a lot more people, whether they stay with this and move up or whatever. It's decent radio, but you now have another company that was watching that company, and they're saying, they'll match the price is what it looks like to me. So the prices in these, in fact, I have on here $110 because it's been down as low as that. Might be $125. I don't know what anybody's charging here at this meeting right now. How much? $110. Okay. So he paid $110 for an MD380 yesterday. Good way to go. A Motorola. These are Motorola's right here with the little tilde sign in front of it, meaning it's not documented anywhere. If you are interested in the higher priced, higher quality, maybe the Motorola equipment, what you want to do is find yourself a ham-friendly dealer. Because if you go to your local city Motorola dealer that provides public safety and commercial applications, I think you'll find the price higher. A lot of times, these ham-friendly dealers, either in your city, ask your ham club, ask me after, I can tell you a couple of names I know. If you're a ham, they will give you a price they do not want to advertise because on one side they're selling it to the city, same radio at a different price. These are from the commercial world. This is an analog system that the Japanese figured how to add that ambi chip and make this into a digital system. These people engineered this from the ground up. They knew they were making a radio for ham radio people. These people didn't make a radio for ham radio. These people, these DMR radios, these were made for public safety around the world, and they were made for a commercial use. So these are primarily still commercial radios out here that clever people have figured out how to make them work for us and for our use, and the usage and expansion and the linking and all this stuff is exploding very rapidly. I mean, it's amazing how quickly this is moving. So that would be the pricing, and I think when you're talking 110 compared to 300 or 400 for a handheld, that's an attractive prospect over there. What do we want next? We do want these companies to start building DMR radios that are more ham designed. So several of these features here that we're wanting in the DMR world, Fusion knew that and built it in. So next generation radios will be dual band. Right now, probably all of these DMR radios are either going to be on VHF or UHF because they're commercial. The commercial people have no reason to change their frequencies. We do. They don't. I go city to city on travels and I need a different frequency, so I have to change it. You have to program it through a backdoor type thing on it. It's not upfront friendly on a DMR. But we would like them to not just be quickly frequency changeable, but we'd like them to be dual band, and I think there's a tri-band coming out. We would like the next generation of digital radios to not have this divide between us where you got a Fusion receiver repeater in the city and you're on DMR and you can't use the Fusion. You can't talk to the guys who are on that. So as we go along, you're going to find these people doing either chip tricks or software backdoors on this, that one radio will do DMR, will do DSTAR, will do Fusion, and will do analog, and will do it on 2 or 3 bands. You can also expect that they're going to make them NXDN, P25, and the European DPRM standard, that they'll add that because they get a better market for around the world use. GPS locating of the nearest cell tower. Wouldn't it be nice if I could turn on my phone and it can find where I am with a GPS signal and then pick up those local frequencies to know from a database, like going to your smartphone and looking up the radio reference and finding out what my nearest repeaters are. My DSTAR radio does do that now. I've got a GPS on the roof. It goes down, it looks up the database, it finds the nearest repeater. I say go to that repeater, and it automatically does that. But I think that feature will be more expanding. Fusion also, I believe, does that. DMR, not. Where you have cell data, so I've got data service from Verizon, but no repeaters, you'd be able to have your radio act like it's a repeater in connecting into the data of the internet. The linking slide I talked about earlier, how's the linking done? It's generally all done by the internet. Some people don't like that. What happens when the world ends? You're not going to have it. I know. But the linking aspects of this is pretty darn cool, that you can link around the country, around the world, and be driving down I-4 and chat with people in a different country or across great distances. But if you don't have a repeater, and this aspect here of being able to go out on the cell data is something that's coming with that, so it'd be a backup on there, or it can have your radio be a mini repeater for your handheld. Cloud updating of code plugs. When you go to a different city on a DMR radio, you have to change your code plugs, which is the combination of like PL tone, they call it color code, and the frequency numbers. So those local data pieces of how to get on the local repeater, you can update with a computer, but to have the cloud update, that would be a nicer thing. And then I think you're going to find, as with anything on this premises here, is that SDR, software-defined radios, are going to be out there more. Pros and cons. The DSTAR of the design would be sort of first generation. Fusion is really a second generation, and DMR would be a third. When what was the name of the company? Vertex Standard, when they were writing stuff up about how they and Yaesu were going into Fusion, they indicated at one point in their documents that they were going to be there for a while till they could master the timing and the expense of the greater CPU power over here for this third generation methodology. I don't know that they're staying with that, but that was what they wrote at the time. Network control, any user can route to anywhere. WiresX goes through the Yaesu process, and here the repeater owners and the bridge owners can choose menus for that, and that's even improved in the last few months with greater expansion of that newer network. Impediments, under the Fusion, they gave out these great quality repeaters for $400 or $500, the DMR1, I think it is. They gave them out, a lot of clubs went over and they had old repeaters. They got a great deal on a new repeater and they bought it and hooked to it, but it didn't say anything about that you were required to hook it to the internet, that you were required to pay a data plan for that nice brand new analog repeater and make it into a linked repeater on the internet. So there was a number deployed and they never got hooked because there was no requirement. They never got hooked to the internet. So when you're inside the city, you can talk around digital to digital with your buddies, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to go out and link somewhere else. These, in general, have all been hooked to it. There's no dual band as the impediments, and no base units. Last I looked, I'm not sure if Yuli had indicated he's selling one, but the last I looked, there was no DMR base units, but you can always take a mobile and power supply and get around your problems. They're coming, okay. Money, a DSTAR will cost you more than, either of these will cost you more than a non-digital, and this one here with the DMR, the falling cost of them is challenging the price of the analogs almost. Origins, the Japanese did this, Yaesu commercial, hobbyists and experimenters inside ham radio tweaked it and made it work. Sophistication, DSTAR was a whole lot more challenging in the beginning. You had to know how to make up that packet of things. You had to know how to transmit what reflectors you wanted to go on, and it was a more difficult programming process. Over the years, the ICOM radio I've got made that look so simple. I couldn't figure out what people were talking about with, having trouble going through it. So it's more crude. But now with more menus and more refined, this sophistication is there. WiresX came out with it right away. At first they had problems with deployment, so a lot of the early systems just didn't have the WiresX capability in them. But they're designed from the ground up. They're going to make that work if they've already made it work, it works in the system. And this was perfected for business and for public safety. Hams themselves are going to do it, but there's no R&D money. But these guys depend on R&D money, this one, from people buying their product. They sent out all those repeaters, and they got to make their money back on that process, but they're going to devote their R&D money to it. DSTAR, different question on that, because there's, should the DSTAR people, the ICOM people, invest R&D money in it? Probably not, because it is an open standard. But analog mode, yes, they all have it. In this one here, it has it where it can automatically switch back and forth based on the last user. User linking, a DSTAR radio can come preloaded with 1,000 repeaters in it. Fusion can be easy. Programming your setup and install on a DMR, you've got to download a local code plug from your local member city. Somebody in your city probably is a DMR guy, and he probably has a code plug that'll work perfect from you. You're going to try that on your own. You're going to be very challenged to build your own code plug if you're new to this and starting out. So the easy answer there is go find out from your local ham club, get somebody else's code plug, stick it in your radio, and life will be much, much easier. Concept of linking, this was to me not common sense. The Fusion, I think, is going to be easier, and I find with the linking on there isn't so much common sense, and in both of these cases here I say you need an Elmer. Repeater linking, on this one here, easy on the later models, harder on the older models. That's, I'm going to put down to be determined, because there's still things going on there. And I find with the linking ability on DMR, I put down the word it's almost too simple. And the reason I say that is you hand somebody one of these DMR radios, and one of the switches on here has got 16 channel positions on it. And they're more filters than they are frequencies, but there'll be 16 of them on there. And you can flip that around, and depending on who made your code plug, who made that up, channel 5 might be statewide, and channel 6 might be 6 statewide, and channel 7 might be the USA. And you start talking from Florida to Alabama to an old Navy buddy, and you're chatting on there for a while. It's really easy to do that, but the problem is that you've got 1,000 other users putting up with your conversation. So it's almost too simple, and some people have gotten in some issues because they're like, oh, what am I supposed to do? This works this way. And here I even talk about tying up the resources. Well, when you're going into one chat room, you're tying up an originating and a destinating. You're tying up your city and the other city with maybe one chat room with maybe 10 people listening in. The Fusion, depending on how it's set up, can be much fewer. But on this here, if you're just in a metro area, you might have 6 repeaters tied up on there. Here, might have been 10 repeaters, but that might be 6 repeaters tied up. If you go Florida statewide, you might tie up 60 repeaters. And if you do the Southeast 10-state area, you might tie up 400 repeaters while you're chatting. So it can be very easy, but you can also you can be much broader than you expect. And for comparison, if anybody knows the SARnet link, SARnet ties up 30 repeaters. So the thing there is that the more widely linked your systems are, is a less of a place to rag chew on there. Ugly side of growth, too easy to connect broadly, what I was just talking about. And this, for instance, talks about the scope of repeaters, of how many you might tie up, or how many repeaters might be able to receive your signal and stuff on there. I won't get into that much farther. Linked repeater issues, so you got people chatting about rag chewing on there and tying up the resources. That's more for DMR that it's on there. Okay. Got more time than expected. Questions, comments? Anybody want me to go back to the slide? Yes, sir.
On slide 20, you were covering your wish list. Do you see any progress toward Bluetooth-enabled radios?
Well, right now, Motorola for a while has had those, so I see no problem with going with that. I know one of the guys in our club came about a year ago wearing his Motorola piece, and it looked like a regular phone Bluetooth.
But I don't mean for the sound aspect of it. I mean being able to control the radio
Okay.
through Bluetooth and being able to modify your packets.
I don't know if that'll come through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or hooking your computer or all of the above, probably is what I would guess. And I don't have insight as to who's working on it or who has it now. Just starting to appear right now. And what would that be? That would be Bluetooth between your handheld radio and your desktop?
What I saw out there was like an Android app talking to the radio.
Okay, and I'll repeat what he's saying. He's saying that what he's seen is that his smartphone will talk to his radio using Bluetooth through, he said Android, but I would imagine, and that does make a lot of sense to be able to do that. Or do you know, in fact, I'll ask you, do you know if we'll be able to go through the radio and go through our phone to get a data connection to the web?
You had mentioned.
Yeah, I mentioned that's the
You
future.
had mentioned the possibility of having the radio with an LTE there,
Right.
with a cellular network. Probably what would make more sense is for the radio to have a Wi-Fi chip, and then when you're pulling down the road, you have one of the little hotspot things from the cell carrier, and just have the Wi-Fi there. And then if you're at home and there's no DSTAR around or no repeaters around or whatever, you link it to your home Wi-Fi.
And I think that's the future we're going to see. Is that you're saying that you would be able to take your phone, your radio, and go out to your phone, and the question is, how do you get on the internet backbone? And the most common way that we see right now is that you got a top of a building, you get a data plan up there with your repeater, you connect it, wires X, DMR, whatever it is, but you connect it via some hotspot service so that the repeater is connected to the internet, and that gives you that linking. The future will probably be more so where our phone can serve as that internet connection from that radio. So I think that's the direction I think a lot of this is going in. Yes, sir. I get asked that a lot of, is this the Sony Betamax versus the VHS war going on? And I'll go back to the slide that I have there. Yes, I think is the answer. Some, yes. If you look, and it may be, like I said, DMR is third generation of this stuff, Fusion is second generation, so, and the Vertex standard people said they would go to the third generation as soon as it became engineeringly affordable. Will that happen with Fusion? I don't think so, but I think that you do have that standard right now. You have that difference of standards right now, where you have, which horse are you going to get on and place your bets. But what I see a lot of these companies coming out with is they're breaking the barriers. They're all going through the internet. So if you can take your DMR radio, talk to your DMR repeater, and go through the internet, you can right now go to a common chat room so that chat room talks to Fusion and DMR people. So as long as both parties direct their radio into that same chat room, it becomes transparent. I think it's going to expand from that too. One of the people here that's developing radios, he's supposed to be producing a radio that has all 3, 5, 7 built in, P25, all of that will be built in from the get-go. And that's been the dream of, I know Connect System, the fellow out there, I don't recall his name, but he had indicated he had produced one of those about 2 years ago. Hasn't come yet, but I think that's what we're going to wind up with. And just the same as you're at a city now, and you can either talk on the 7.0 machine or the 7.6 machine or the 6.7 machine. You can talk on any of those. I think you're going to find you'll turn your radio to the Fusion repeater or to the DMR repeater. It'll be the same radio, and it can solve these issues of these protocols because there's a lot in common. I mean, they all use the same. A lot of them use an ambi chip. I think it's a matter of solving some of those. And I think that's where the world is going with it. But I don't have the answer to that one yet. I think someone here was...
Yeah, do you have any visibility past the third generation? I mean, we have the wish list that you had on your slide, but is there any development work or spec work being done on what's fourth generation?
Okay, so what he's looking for is he's not going to buy the radio until he gets his fourth generation. I don't want to deal with the second and third and the DSTAR and stuff. Makes some sense. I don't know. I think that a lot of ham radio is an experiment in progress. This stuff is moving quite quickly. And even if us hams aren't pouring great amounts of money into the research and development, these guys are pouring vast quantities of money into channel sharing and time sharing. And where I talk about 2 users sharing a TDMA slot, I'm not sure how many they use, 6, 10, 15 users on TDMA of time sharing. But these guys are quite sophisticated, and I think we're the beneficiaries of a lot of that R&D money that is spent first in the cellular market and the public safety market. And then if you have the government come along and tell the fire departments that they want them all to be interconnected, and right now maybe it's P25 in the US, they might come up with P50, and the next thing we get the old radios, but that's generation 4, generation 5. I don't have an answer. I don't know. I'll come back to you. This gentleman here, somewhere here, had a question.
I'm just going to pick up on the DMR, how the programming feature, setting up Connect system already has the radios to the
Connect system already has that.
The 580 to Clocky.
Okay.
And they have for sale here too.
Okay. He says Connect system already has that, where you get off the airplane in a city and you say, find me a repeater. It's already available. DSTAR had it for years as well, but I guess they're, like I said, DMR is still a commercial radio primarily, so it's up to smaller companies. Connect Systems are developing that stuff. And go back to the question here.
Today, if it came to a repeater and it's less crowded, how do you describe which one of the 3 are most common on a repeater?
So the question is that of the 3 standards, which ones are the least crowded? Well, they won't work on the same channels. So, and it comes down to, I went up to HRO in Wilmington, Delaware. I was up at that and talked to them. Told them I had presented down here on DMR, and they said, nobody here's buying DMR. We're all Fusion. And I was like, oh, that's impressive. And then I realized, at that time, HRO wasn't selling any DMR. So, yeah, I guess you would be seeing lots of Fusion in the store there. So I think that all 3 seem to be present in a lot of the bigger cities. Which one's winning in those cities is I don't think there's a database that you could look up and see which one it is. So an answer might be is talk to people on the different standards, borrow a radio, play with it. A lot of DMR people will lend out a radio to people, and you try it out, see how it is at where you're at home or with the places that you visit, because it might be good for your neighbor, and you're not on that side of town, so your signal stays until somebody puts up that repeater from you. So that's the jury's still out, unless we get that 4th generation on there.
Can you talk about hotspot usage?
Can I talk about hotspot usage? Not very well. Meaning.
A DB4 meaning.
Oh, okay.
DMR equivalent, the DSTAR equivalent.
So what he's asking about is these hotspots, and what you can do is for these little memory sticks. I guess that the long one is in the computer, but a little memory stick looking device like this, you can plug into your PC, and you put a little antenna on that. And so on your property, near your house, you can take your handheld radio and you can talk to that memory stick looking device with a little antenna on your PC. So now what you've got is you've got your handheld radio, you have a mini repeater, a micro repeater, a femtone cell repeater that's in your bedroom, your house, your living room, and it is putting you onto the internet. And with that, with like these DMR radios, once you're on the internet, you can talk to all the guys in your city if that's how you have your switch set. So you set your switch, whether you want to talk to the guys just on your nearby city repeater, you can talk to the 8 repeaters that surround the city, or you can talk to the 8-state area, the whole state area, or the Georgia, or the Florida, whichever you want. So that is your gateway, the hotspot that he's asking about, and these things are available for just over $100, I think. And I believe the hotspot that he's selling here is transparent, that it can work either on DSTAR or on Fusion or on DMR. You can take that same device and set it for whichever one of those protocols and standards you want to use, whatever you're using on your property. So it opens up the world for you. So if you are out miles from downtown from that repeater on your property in that area, you can get a high quality connection to the internet and talk to local repeaters, not by radio waves, but by going on a short radio wave to your computer in your bedroom and then getting on the internet and then getting on the tallest building in town.
That's actually how I do it at home.
That's how you do it at home. And it's probably how I need to do it at home because it keeps saying, you're breaking up. So, yes, sir.
I was just going to remind everybody that in the early days of GPS, when there was like 8 satellites up, if you want to do something, it was 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 3:30 tomorrow, or whatever. There was 3 computation methods. Everybody had, A, B, C, whatever it was. And both reasons why they were best, and the other guys were the worst. The next generation, they offered 2 methods, and after that, it was gone.
That's gone. And actually,
Forgot, nobody ever talked about them.
he's talking about.
What it is now, but
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's the old Ford Chevy.
When I was growing up, that's exactly what I was going to say. When I was growing up, it was the Ford people didn't know diddly squat. They had the worst cars in the world, and us Chevy folks, we were the smart people. So, Fusion or DMR or DSTAR, I think there's some element to that. It's or Mac or PC. It's what you've been comfortable with, what works for you, and I don't want to change. So you get some of that where people get locked in onto, they get comfortable with, and know what they got. So I think that's a comparable thing to it right now. I think DSTAR is amazing. I think that Fusion is amazing, and I think that DMR is amazing. They're all 3 different ones. They do some different things on it, but the similarities are this thing where I can talk locally, or I can pull these other tricks, and I can go linking around the world. And that to me, when I've had one of my friends in a club objected to me giving a presentation like this because I was encouraging you people to go buy a digital radio and get involved in this, and he said, what's going to happen when the lights go out? And I was like, well, then you better give up using the downtown repeater because it ain't going to work anyhow, because you're going to be back to you better have good batteries or a generator for your HF radio and hope your antenna doesn't blow down too. So we're all vulnerable with these things, but in the meantime, this stuff is a lot of fun, being able to use these powers of these radios and do some of these things. Don't give up your HF, but enjoy this too. Yes, sir.
On any of these systems, can you do radio to radio, simplex? In other words, no repeat.
On any of these systems, can I do radio to radio? Yes. And in fact, I'll tell you, on DSTAR, the HF people are using DSTAR to go HF, which I found was amazing. Why not? Makes sense. On the Fusion and in the DMR, if you don't have a repeater around and you're driving down the road with some buddies, you can go to digitally encoded. It's not encoded. That's prohibited by the FCC, but it's a digital signal that will give you improved distance or improved quality of communication, because they say the digitals don't have any more distance than the analogs, but most digital people swear they do have more distance, but I think it's they don't have that, they haven't fallen off the digital cliff. They're still in that enriched area where the error correction is making up for the splatters and the noises we're used to with the analog.
That answers the question about when all the repeaters go down. If you have agreed upon how to communicate ahead of time when the repeaters go down, you can do it.
Yes,
You
you
might
can
have
still
to
do it.
relay it across town, but
Well, if you take the example of that downtown, we've got a tall building with a DMR repeater. As long as that building has power, we all have that, but we can't link out on the internet. So if the internet goes down, we lose a piece of that. But if the power of the building goes down, yes, you can go handheld to handheld. So it still works. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you all. I think we're right on time. I appreciate it.